So, welcome to Shift. And with me today is one of my dearest and bestest friends, Roger Webb. Roger, I met honestly probably about 5 years ago, maybe six now, through Facebook. So, for those of you that say Facebook doesn't have any value, it doesn't bring anything to my life, it's horrible, it's trash, I'm going to tell you, one of my best friends I met through Facebook, and we were friends on Facebook for probably a year before we actually met in person. And I connected with Roger. We're in the same essential oil industry, and it's obviously dominated by females. And so, being men, finding another man in the essential oil industry, I was like, I want to talk to this guy. And I saw one of his Facebook posts, and he was selling goods, auctioning off items to help his daughter with a project she was working on that I believe was going to take her overseas, or she was already overseas. Um, and for me, I was like, here's a dude that's like putting it all out there to help his kid achieve her dreams. And I was like, I want to be friends with that guy. And I want to support any father. I've got six daughters of my own, two sons. And Roger, you've got five kids and raised them mostly as a single dad. So I think we got a lot we can talk about. Um, but I just really wanted to support him, and I had no idea that we would have so much in common, that we would become such good friends. He's been to my home. We do as much as we can together, and unfortunately, we live in separate states, and so a lot of our communication is like this. But I am so thrilled and honored to have you be a part of the new podcast. And if you don't know, Roger helped launch Shift in 2018, now 19, at a sold out event for men at doTERRA's global convention. And while this podcast won't be about doTERRA or essential oils, it's hard not to bring it up because it is so integral to both of our lives, and it's the reason that we met. So, Roger, what's going on?
Hey, good to be here. There's another side of that story that you don't know, you haven't told, is that when I saw you and Carrie at first online, I was like, okay, these people are going to be my friends. I don't care what it takes. We're going to figure out a way to become friends. So yeah, absolutely. It's great.
Awesome. So I kind of want to start with your story. I mean, you have a very unique, uh, you know, story, and we can take it back as far as you want. But the things that I know, from battling depression or overcoming depression, there's all sorts of ways we can phrase things. But you have five kids, raised them mostly single.
Mhm.
Their mom's involved, you sort
Sometimes.
of sometimes, right? So, start wherever you want. But I think there's so many things that I know about you, with Shift, I try to bring people on that have shifted their lives, that have had 180s, that have gone down one path and recognized their own faults, taken accountability for their own things, and they've been able to make some sort of a shift. And so I'm really interested in sort of what your story is, what happened for you that created that shift, or what tools you used. And we could just kind of unpack that stuff and take it from wherever you want.
Wow. That's a big box to open.
It is.
I there's several different ways I can take this, but um I always knew there was something different in my life than the path I was on. I was raised in a super conservative faith that had me living in a box that I never felt I belonged in lots of different ways. And I never felt like I belonged. And so my shift really started, oh, geez, in 1997 when I started my journey in personal development. I took a seminar one weekend and it caused me to start thinking differently than I'd ever thought before. And that led to another seminar and another seminar and another book and another workshop. And eventually I started realizing that I had value as me, not as me that fit in this box, but as me. And it just really led to me starting to question my life and everything about it. I was married. I call it the game of like I was raised a Mormon, and I call it the Mormon game of life. Like, you spin the wheel, you go to the box, you do what it says. You spin the wheel, you go to the box, you do what it says. And I finally got tired of doing that. I I never fit in lots of ways. Mainly, biggest one is that I'm gay, and as soon as I started questioning life in general, like the box that I was in, I started realizing that there was so much more. And it just led my life, it just started blossoming. Like, my life just started opening up to more and more things that I never knew were possibilities for me. And eventually ended up coming out, leaving the church, getting divorced, starting my life all over again at 35 years old. And, that was a pretty epic year. I came out, I got divorced, I left the church all in the same year. And they weren't all interdependent on each other. They just kind of all happened at the same time. But I woke up one day and realized, I have an opportunity here that I could really truly decide, what do I want? Who do I want to be? And that's not a choice that a lot of people realize they have. And I think one of the things that I try to help people understand now is you can make that choice any moment. It doesn't have to be a big transformational thing in your life that throws you into a new life. You could wake up one day and say, "Hey, it's time for me to be different, and it's time for me to create a new life." And
Yeah.
I got to do that. I got to create literally who I was, what persona I was going to put out, and it was the first time I ever really truly started living my life, and it
So
was amazing.
what was the catalyst for that for you? Was it there was enough, like, what was that catalyst? I have all sorts of assumptions, but you tell me.
For which part?
Like, to just say I'm going to be who I am.
You know,
Like you said, there's lots of layers there, right? Like, you're getting
yeah,
divorced, you're coming out, you're leaving the church.
for me, it was just about, I'd had enough personal development to know that I had a choice in my life. And it was like I just woke up one day and realized it was right at, like, literally, it was the day after I moved out of the house. I had my own apartment. It was the first time I had ever been on my own. I was 35 years old. And I remember waking up and walking into my apartment and realizing, like, holy shit, like, I don't know this life. Like, I don't know what to do. And I just realized, wait a minute, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Like, I can really truly start living my life the way I want. And that just trickled into every other area of my life. I just saw the opportunity and realized, luckily, I'd had enough awakening prior to that to know that that was an option.
Yeah.
But it was great.
So in that space, how much would you say that you wrestled with fear and anxiety and how people would react, right? Because you're talking about walking away from things that are really, really, and I'll use a church as an example because that's typically where people have like deep rooted core value belief structures that, and a lot of times they don't even understand why they have them, right? They can't defend them. They were imparted at birth, or
Yeah.
their parents had indoctrinated them. And I hate to use that phrasing because it has a negative connotation, but in some ways that's what it is. And so, like, I have a hard enough time telling my wife I don't like the shoes that she has on. I can't imagine walking away from like your faith, or at least the organization, right? And your
That's
wife.
an important piece, though. People in, like, there are some faiths that you're just walking away from the church, but when you're a Mormon, when you're Jewish, when you're evangelical, whatever it is, if that's how, like, that's your culture. Like, it's it defines everything in your life. So it really, really, truly was me just literally opening a door to a new world that I didn't even know. Like, I didn't even know what the possibilities were,
Yeah.
and it was terrifying.
And I mean, I have to imagine it was terrifying. And those sorts of cultural dynamics, I mean, they definitely inform, every decision you make. They may not make the decisions for you. In my own journey, I found that me taking responsibility for my stuff was one of the hardest things, because I also recognized in that process that I had very little tools, very few resources to fix it. I knew it was broken. I knew it was my fault. I knew I had to fix it, but I had no clue how. Right.
Mm.
And you talk about like, I'm seeing this image of you like going into your apartment or waking up in your apartment for the first time and you're living by yourself for the first time. And it's almost like being a newborn and going, okay, now what? I have no idea who I am, what I'm supposed to do. What is breakfast, lunch, and dinner look like? What, what that all looks like. And for me, I was lucky in my recovery to have a wife and to have a family and to have things to lean on. In your experience though, when you walk away from a church and you walk away from a marriage, I have to imagine that there was some level of ostracization or
Oh,
people turning their backs on
oh,
you.
I
And
I I lost most of my life. Like very few friends stuck with me because they were my church friends and they were my friends and
sure,
that. So yeah, I really truly did. I was very fortunate. At least I had, a small core group of people that was involved in some, workshops and seminars that I'd been in who were there and supporting me. I was very involved in men's work at the time, and I was very fortunate that I had a pretty amazing circle of men who were just really there for me to kind of help me navigate because there are times that I was just lost.
yeah,
Uh, and here's the thing though, I mean, it was a scary time in my life, but it was also one of the most exciting times in my life. Like there was a lot of excitement for me to finally figure me out and have the freedom to do that. It was the first time I'd ever been given like a blank slate to say, okay, figure it out now. And it's okay.
yeah.
And so it was scary, but it was exciting. It was kind of like that moment when you're like standing, like when you're skydiving or something, it's terrifying, but it's also really exciting at the same time.
Yeah, I can't relate to that. You've tried to get me to jump out of a plane with you in the past, and that's still a thing that I'm not sure is gonna happen. But I certainly appreciate I can visualize
Yeah.
the feeling. It makes me think about, and this was, how long ago was this for you? This was 15, 20 years ago,
15 years
maybe?
ago. 15 years, yeah.
So 15 years ago, cancel culture wasn't a thing, right? And so you're kind of in that way a trendsetter. But we had these things that happened, right? We had things that happened historically where people would get ostracized. We didn't talk about them, and we weren't vulnerable, and we didn't take accountability. So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on so early is because I feel like your story really highlights how vulnerability and accountability are the catalysts to radical change in our life, right? Like, yes, it's scary as hell. Yes, you probably, and I'll make some assumptions, but you had no idea what was going to happen, the next day, let alone 5 years, 10 years, 15 years
Yeah.
down the road, what that was going to look like for you. And I think the thing that holds most people back, and I'd love your thoughts on this because we both work in sort of coaching and mentoring and helping people with their limiting beliefs. I think a lot of times what holds people back is the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And so while they know they're unhappy and they're kind of stuck, they'd rather be stuck than take a risk and be worse off,
Yeah.
right? It's like that there's crazy fear of the unknown.
And for me, I think there was even another component is that I spent the last 3 years of my life in my former life in conversion therapy also. And that was,
Mm,
and through that, between conversion therapy, my wife, the church, everybody, like the things that I was told that would happen to me if I came out, if I left the church, like I was ready for my world to be over. I was told I'd lose my children. I was told I would end up as an alcoholic drug addict with AIDS. Like I was given this long laundry list of things that would happen to me if I made this choice. And I hit the point where it was no longer okay for me to not make that choice. Like I was dying inside, and I finally realized that the only way I could start living again is to do it, to jump out and say, okay, this is who I am now. I need to live this life. But there was like this long list of things that I was sure was going to happen, and then
yeah,
none of it did, and it just gave me even more fuel to say, wow, an amazing life is possible.
yeah. I love that. That, and my experience has been when we can move beyond the fear into what we know in our hearts is you know God's desire for us, or whatever your spiritual belief around that is. When we can move towards that, my experience has been that it has always been better. It hasn't always worked out like perfectly. Iron sharpens iron, and that happens under friction and heat and fire and intense, things. But my experience has been that it's always been better. And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing, because I know for people that don't know, you do or did. I don't know if you're still doing them, but you had some belief breakthrough workshops where you helped people to move beyond upper limits, and really those upper limits are in place from fear.
Yeah.
So there's tools that you have, and things like that. And I don't want you to give away everything for free, but I'd love to know if you have some thoughts around what does it look like, or how can I, when I'm pushed up against that thing where I'm like, I know this isn't good for me, whether it's a relationship, marital or spousal or partner, or just circles of friends, or a job. What are some of those tools that you used to sort of help you step into that fear? Because you and I both know, like, suicide rates among teens, and suicide rates, especially amongst teens in churches, or amongst the LGBTQ community,
Yeah.
is comparatively higher because they feel like they have no alternative. They feel like they have no options, and that's all fear based. And
Yeah.
so for me, like, I really want to try to help people come away with an understanding of, yeah, it's scary. I mean, it's scary as hell. And if we can give you the tools to recognize that, like, whatever mess you're in, you probably created part of that mess. And that also means that the beauty of it is, like you said, I get to do whatever I want to do. I get to figure it out. Right.
For me, it really comes down to the world that I want to live in, like tomorrow. My number two strength is futuristic, which was not a surprise for me. In fact, I think it probably is more my number one strength. I see the picture of tomorrow like vividly clear. And I've done a lot of work to get clear on what do I want my tomorrow to be? What do I want it to look like? Who am I going to be in 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And that I use that as my driving force. And my question I have people ask is, whatever comes up, whatever this obstacle is that's in your life today, whether it be fear, whether it be, a physical obstacle, whether it be family, friends, somebody, as your obstacle, is that bigger than my why? Is that bigger than my purpose? Is that bigger than my mission? And 99% of the time, the answer is no, when you really
Mhm.
sit down and look at that. And so if it's not, then okay, see you later, move on. I don't take time with it. And that's been the biggest shift of my life, is being able to really identify, is whatever this thing is right here is it really going to matter in 5 years? Most of the time, not. You know, when we really sit down and look at our lives, crazy crises that we had in our lives, they figured themselves out most of the time. And we get caught up in the muck. Whereas if we just trust that I'm good, I'm doing what's right, I'm doing what's best for me, I'm going to move forward, and I'm just going to keep going because I have a really clear picture of what my life is. I know who I am. Like, I know my mission, I know my purpose, and that drives me through everything.
Awesome. That's so good. Okay, so you talked about you knowing who you are and knowing what your purpose is. So I want to give you the opportunity to share what your purpose is, and how are you taking that confidence and that ability to, like, understand who you are. One, I know you do that for your kids, right? Like, imparting that into your kids and helping them figure out who they are, and honoring that. But, like, how else do you use what you understand, and what is your purpose? What do you feel like that is for you right now?
You know, I went through a workshop to identify my mission and purpose. And I can tell you, when it came to the end, when I figured out what it was, I was terrified to write it because it was huge. And I remember sitting with that piece of paper, and literally the person running the workshop was like, "Come on, Roger, write it down." I'm like, "No, because if I write it, then it's real, and this is big, and it is to shift the consciousness of humanity." That's what it is. And I finally wrote it, and it's amazing once I owned that, how many things in my life have piled into place to align with me to do that. And so, whether that be through my workshops, whether it be through just my interactions one on one with somebody, whether it be through my business or a book or anything, like that's my purpose now, and that's what I do. I believe that I'm here to shine a light and help people see. For me, the biggest gift in my life was when I finally was able to question everything and step into that place of, wow, I really don't know everything that I thought I knew.
Yeah.
And I think when we do that, we open ourselves up to so much magic, because there's so many things that I would never have been open to learning because I knew already. And being able to help someone challenge themselves in, okay, this is your belief. Let's look at it. Let's talk about it. Like, are you willing to get dirty with me? Like, that's the kind of thing I like to have those conversations. And I know you're great with that, is like to
Yeah.
really look at what are your beliefs, and are they really your beliefs, and do they align with everything that you are?
Yeah.
And when we look at that, there's so much greatness that comes when you're
Yeah.
just willing to say, wow, maybe I don't know.
Yeah. I think there's huge value in humility. Um, and I did a project with a gentleman here in town, and one of the things that we talked a lot about for this particular thing was he wanted to take these concepts and he wanted to, in his words, put them on trial for their life. I want to know if like this thing is really what it is, and in order for me to find that out, I'm going to act as if it's on trial, and we're going to
Mm,
pick it apart as much as we can. And the other thing was he taught me was how to be intellectually honest,
mm,
right? And so when we think about the things that we believe, it's okay. Well, like I used to say that everything you get, like you give, comes back to you tenfold, right? And I do believe that like what we give comes back to us, and I believe that there's energy around that, and there's synergy, and that the more that we can give, the more that will we receive. But it's not necessarily like dollar for dollar. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, you believe that whatever you give comes back tenfold? And I said, yeah. And he said, how much money do you have in your bank account? And I thought for a minute, and he was like, if you have money in your bank account, you don't really believe that, because if you did, you would give that money away and
mm.
it would come back to you tenfold. And then you would give that away. And he's like, it's just a basic compounding interest. And I was like, oh, okay. Wait a minute. Do I really believe that? Because it was really fascinating, and it forced me to, like you say, think about, what do I really believe? What are my real true core values? And then how can I live those out? Because for me, I think the really important thing is, if you say you believe it, your actions have to support it, right? You have to live it out. And it's one of the reasons why you and I are such good friends, because you've always modeled for me how to act what you say,
Mm.
right? And even when you're human, and even when you may not, I've seen you either self-correct or receive feedback and say, "Oh, thanks for pointing that out. I was kind of lost in my own crap for a minute." Right? And I think that's where a lot of people, and kind of where I want to take the conversation a little bit, is towards that accountability piece, because I feel like so many people right now aren't willing to recognize the things that they're going through and be humble enough to say, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't know if I really believe this. I don't know if my dad was right, right? Or my pastor's right, or the government's right. And versus saying, well, I've aligned myself with this thing, and I'd rather go down in flames than admit that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know that there's so much a question there, but I'd love to know like your thoughts about it, and where where you land in that accountability space. Because I know you have a daughter who's very vocal and very engaged in a lot of movements that are really kind of rooted in helping people to be held accountable.
Yeah. You know, I will say, as you're talking, I just had this thought come that since I've allowed myself to move into this space, like it was scary. It was scary to go into to shift my consciousness into a place of I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong, and I want to know if I'm wrong, and
Yeah.
be willing to know that if I'm wrong, and be willing to say, hey, I need some support here, and reach out to people to help me with that. But I can tell you, since I've shifted to that lifestyle, I'm happier than I've ever been. And I think that's a piece that so many people miss is my happiness has come through my humility and accountability because I'm in this constant quest now, and you've been very instrumental in helping me get there. Like I love that you question everything. Like you want to know, not for sake of causing argument or throwing a wrench in, but like, yeah, I'm genuinely curious and I want to know points of view. And since I've done that, like I'm so much happier than I ever
Yeah.
was before. Because when it comes from a place of this is what I believe and this is how it is, there's no room to allow new things, and new things are what bring me joy.
Yeah. It's such a great point. Eckhart Tolle or Tolle, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. He has a book, it's quite a few years old. And in that book, I want to say it's I can't remember the name. I'll have to throw it in the show notes. But he talks about belief systems. And he shared, and this really helped shift me early on when I started on this sort of path of personal development. And it was really when I was getting sober and taking accountability for my own life. But he said, when you formulate a belief, whatever that belief is, that means that you believe it to be absolutely true. And if that is the case, then everything else has to be wrong or
Mhm.
incorrect or bad. And he sort of presented it as like, think of the arrogance behind that, that through your little sliver of experience, you've determined this absolute truth and everyone else has to be wrong. And it really opened my eyes to that because my fifth strength, my anchor strength is learner. So everything is informed for me by learning. So I'm grateful that you recognize it's just genuine curiosity because a lot of people think that I'm asking those questions to like belittle them or dismantle their belief structures. And I really just want to learn. And my wife is amazing and she taught me a tool unintentionally, but I've used it and it's a tool that she uses or when she's talking to somebody, instead of asking them like a particular to like, and they receive it as being either judgmental or really questioning their intention, what she'll ask them is, "Tell me more."
Mm.
And it's totally different than saying, "Well, why do you believe that?" Or "Why is that this way?" Or "Tell me how that works." It's just, "Tell me more." And they'll inevitably open up enough that I get what I need in terms of like a little bit more detail or a little bit of context. And it's been a really great tool to help sort of break out how to learn more about people. But in order to do that, you have to be humble enough to know that you don't know everything and that what you do know is really only true until the next thing comes along,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like what was scientifically factual in 1950 is now complete horseshit, and we've gone a completely different direction. And in some ways, what was or is scientifically factual has been replaced with, the loudest opinion in the room,
Mhm.
and those sorts of things. So it's super fascinating how humility can bring you. I think it does make you happier because how hard is it when you have to fight to be right all the time?
It's exhausting. And it just eats away at your soul. Mine did. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's hard. And you said something I really love is, we don't know what's coming tomorrow. We don't know what learnings are going to be coming out. We don't know what discoveries are going to be made. We don't know what, it's funny. I work out in VR, and one of my workouts is on this planet in space, and it's incredible. And there's this quote from one of my coaches that I hear in my head every single day. And she said, 5 years ago, if you would have told me that I would be working out with you in space and I've never even seen you and you're not in the same room with me, I'd have thought you were crazy. So who are we to say this is the only thing I'm capable of? Because we don't know what's going to be happening tomorrow. And I think about that every day and it helps me. You're right. We don't know. If you'd have told
We
me
just
10 years
don't.
ago that my life would be here today, I would have thought you were crazy.
Oh, me 10 years ago wouldn't be friends with me today.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
now I've been using that saying for a couple years, so maybe I got to move to 15, but legitimately
Yeah.
I I mean, I'm a father. I've been married for 23 years. I have 8 children and I work in an essential oil industry as my primary source of income. And if you'd have told me 10 years ago that I'd be sitting here doing a podcast with someone from another state about accountability and vulnerability and what grace looks like in 20, I would have told you you were out of your effing mind.
Yeah.
And I today am doing exactly what I want to be doing. Like I am in no way a victim. I love what I do. I love that my wife created a business that I could join her in and that I get to support her and do my own things. Like it's crazy. And so much of that came from me taking the story I created about my upbringing, my parents, my sisters, my coworkers, abuse, all those things and going, how much of that is actually true? Or how much of the emotion and the reason and the story behind it is just bullshit? And
Mhm.
can I reframe that or just let it go and focus on like figuring out for me it was having kids. It really was when my son was 3. So he was 3 and Riley, my oldest child, was 5. I was at a crossroads where I was going to lose my family. I was going to end up in prison or on the street and I was going to lose my family. And my dad was married 3 times and he was able to make some changes and keep that 3rd marriage together. But I just sort of understood that I was going to be married and divorced and it wasn't that big a deal. That's what everybody did. And I I I remember very distinctly the thought of losing my children was paralyzing.
Yeah.
And I knew I had to make some changes. And I knew that I had to look in the mirror and say, you know what? All this stuff that I think I know, it's probably not. And so it was really about like stripping back all the layers and going, okay, let's act as if I don't know anything. And there's this really great Buddhist concept of beginner's mind that I love. And it's really kind of where I came to was like, I'm going to start tomorrow with a beginner's mind. I don't know anything. Nobody's hurt me. Nobody's done anything to me. I'm just going to walk, with a fresh slate, so to speak. And it's really difficult. Demons creep up, all the insecurities, all the things, all the addictions, all the stuff that we use to distract ourselves. It can be really, really hard to do that. But I feel like it comes back to that humility piece of going, one, I don't know everything. And the other piece to that, I think, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, is kind of recognizing that we're all broken. Like we all need help. And
For me, I look at it a little bit differently. I don't like the word broken because that was used in a bad way towards me, but
fair enough.
it helped me shift that belief. I was told I was broken for years, and that's what messed me up so much. But just using a different phrase, a different term, like we're human beings,
Hmm.
and human beings screw up
Yeah.
every day. And we have shit in our life that needs to be cleaned up and fixed and worked on. And that's the piece that was important for me to finally discover is that I'm not broken, I'm normal.
Yeah.
Like we're all messed up. We all have stuff that needs cleaned up. You cannot That's part of the human existence.
Yeah.
And when we look at it as though that's just a normal part of being a human, it changes it from I'm broken and I'm not good enough to, oh, I'm normal.
Yeah.
I just need to work on my stuff.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a way to shift the connotation of the word broken
Yeah.
because for me, like it gets into semantics, right? Like, and you know me, like words have meaning, and I mean, we talk about radical accountability, which is like, let's not sugarcoat it, right?
Mhm.
And and I like that. Yeah, like we are all flawed. We all make mistakes. None of us are perfect. That's sort of the whole point, right? Which is a really great segue to another sort of topic, or it's not even another topic. It's just another layer of the same topic, which is the ability for us to offer each other grace. Because I know, like, we're friends. I know that you've done things you shouldn't do, or you've allowed yourself to upper limit in a situation, and you know that I've done that. And we've both kind of had those conversations with each other, or I've said something to you, and I know that when you kind of raise your eyebrow, you're like, really? Is that really what's happening? So we know these things about each other, right? Because we're in a relationship,
Yeah.
and you give me grace and I give you grace because we have experienced similar things, and we have enough of a relationship that I also know that 90% of the time Roger shows up, right? But it seems to me that, like, we've created this environment and this culture where if you're not in my immediate circle, or maybe my second group of my circle, you make a mistake, you're horrible,
Mm.
right? I don't think that that's really
Yeah.
what's happening.
This last year has helped me to really understand that. I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but you know, the whole world went through shit last year. And I think that it was good for me because it helped me see that we really truly are all in this together. And I'll never forget when it really shifted, when COVID first started. One of my friends, all of us said stupid things at the beginning of COVID because we didn't know what was coming. And one of my friends posted this picture, or this whole series of pictures of people that had like plastic bags over their heads and all this, making fun of them for, that was their version of protecting themselves. And when I saw the picture, something in me, I think it was the dad in me, really just churned. And I said, wow, imagine how terrified those people are that they have to do that silly whatever it is. You're like, imagine how terrified they are that they have to go out and get groceries for their family. And they're so scared that they're going to walk outside and die if they breathe the air. So they're willing to put a plastic bag over their head because that's all they've got. And that humanized everyone for me in that moment, where I just saw that we really, truly are all in this together. And it helped me to stop doing that. And I used to do that. And, sure, I'm a human. I still catch myself a lot of times. But for me, just realizing like we're all people and we all have our construct of what our lives are about and what's real and what's true and what's safe and what's not. Who am I? I don't know your experience. If you're 3 or 4 level, if I see a stranger in the store doing something stupid, the old me would have made fun of them. And now I'm like, wow, I don't know their experience. I don't know why they're doing this. I don't know what's happening in their world. Who am I to judge that? One of my dear friends who you and I both know, she's one of the owners of our company. She told me once, she said, Roger, there's only one judge and it's not me. And I've tried to live by that. And I think that's where it comes to is as soon as we all admit that we're all screwed up and that we all have stuff and that we all have our own situations, it helps us understand and give more grace to people when we don't understand what's going on in theirs.
I have had similar experiences where I've caught myself, either judging people or not understanding and assuming the worst. And I've been having this sort of conversation with myself lately about what is the difference between judgment and discernment, because there's this overlap, right? Like, I will, in this context, yes, seeing someone and their experience, and I mean, let's be honest, sometimes it's just funny, right?
Sure.
Somebody's got a fishbowl on their head, that's funny. And that doesn't mean that we need to belittle them or that they're less than. It's that's their experience, right? And when you see that, it can be kind of, oh, I'm sorry, is that a fishbowl? Uh, but there's a difference there between judgment also and like discernment, right? And I've had this sort of conversation around what does that actually mean, because at the end of the day it's discrimination, right? And so is it coming from a place of a lack of education, which is what I think.
Mm.
I think a lot of times it's just a lack of education. Or is it coming from my personal experience with a particular type of person, whether it's a skin color, a ethnic background, a economic background, that has informed my decision because I just haven't had other learned experiences, right? And really just going back to the humility piece, that it's like, well, gosh, I'm not like every tattooed bald guy that you might see. Um, in a lot of ways, using the stereotype, I'm probably a lot different.
Mhm.
And so it gets super, super tricky. And for me, it's come down to like proximity. Like I've done a lot of work, and I know you have. And we're going to talk about some of the nonprofit work that you're doing, but I've done a lot of work in like these big global nonprofits, and I've come to the realization that like I want to shift my focus to local. It's about proximity. I want to feel the impact. I want to see the impact. And I think what happens is, this analogy popped in my head the other day. Our impact is felt more both for the person that we're working to help and ourselves when it's closer. Like if I fire a bullet, and you were in the military, so you got firearms training, right? But if I fire a bullet and it's from me to you 7 yards, that's going to do massive damage or have massive impact. But if I fire something over a couple of miles, chances are nobody's going to even know, right? It's going to have very minimal impact. And it
Yeah.
just sort of struck me like I really want to get close to helping people and to being aware of like how we're interacting with one another. Um, And so yeah, it's fascinating how if we slow down a little bit and we kind of add a little accountability and a little vulnerability and a little bit of grace, we really start to just give a shit about one another. And we start to care about how we're affecting them.
For me, I would completely agree that in my experience, it's all been about education. It's been just about, when I opened my mind to something I didn't know, I learned something amazing. Good example. I was talking to a friend last night. When I went to Thailand for my daughter's wedding a couple years ago, I've always been scared of Asia for some reason. When I think about traveling the world, I think about going to Europe because it's familiar. It's
Right.
similar to what we are. Asia's like, whoa, that's different.
Yeah.
Like,
They eat some crazy shit over there.
so different. Yeah. And
There's a lot of weird stuff
I've
going on.
always been nervous about it. And when I went, I fell in love with the food,
Hmm.
people, with everything. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, look at what I would have missed out on if I would have opened myself up to an opportunity
Yeah.
to learn about a different people, a different culture, a different whatever. And now it's kind of made me hungry. Like I just want to like what's the next place that I'm gonna fall in love with because I don't know about it now.
Yeah.
It really is about allowing ourselves to be educated to something different than what we know.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And I can't wait to get to Thailand. A lot of those places scare me. Like you get there, the signs are all in different languages. It's all,
Yeah,
but people are people, man. Like if you need to figure out how to eat, you'll figure it out, right? And you'll
yeah.
find the cool stuff. And I think there's such a great understanding of the human condition when you start to experience, even in small ways, what other cultures are going through. It reminds me of uh, a message I heard from one of the pastors at our church, and he was talking about COVID and what people were experiencing, and he was getting letters saying, "Hey, you're not opening the church because the government's holding you down, and we should be more like go get them and open the doors." And other people were saying this, that, and the other, and he was getting a lot of emails, and he just kind of said, y'all are entitled. It's like people all over the world deal with similar things to this for a lot less important reasons.
Yeah.
and they're not able to go grocery shopping or go see a movie, and they have to jump through way more hoops to do the things that we all take for granted for. And it just really struck me like we need to get close. And that doesn't mean that we can't go to another country, it doesn't mean we can't go across the world, but we need to interact with humans,
Hmm.
right? We've got to get back to like loving on people. And I've had this experience recently where I will see a friend of mine post something in a social media platform, and instead of responding, I'll call them
Mm.
and
Wow.
I'll say, "Hey, I saw your post. Tell me more." And they're like, "What?" And it's like, "Well, I don't agree with what you posted, or from just the little bit I see in your meme, I'm creating a story about what you think or feel or who you are. So tell me where you're coming from with that." Versus commenting, being like, "This is BS," or,
Mm.
well, so and so did that. And I've also had conversations that have happened in social media where, through lack of context or whatever, things get lost in just reading somebody's comment. It's gone sideways. And so I've picked up the phone and called someone, and it's gone straight to voicemail. And it's like, oh, so you'll yell at me here, but you won't talk to me like a human,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, oh, now, which is why I kind of am really digging Clubhouse, which I know you're not on yet. We'll get you there. Um, because it's all like, it's like a virtual dinner party. Like we're all in a room having a conversation, and nobody's willing to like verbally assault someone because, like they would in type, right? It's all very respectful, even when there's dissenting opinions and dissenting, ideas about things, or like radical core beliefs that are different. People are still respectful because they're talking and you can
I
hear the
totally see
inflection
that.
and the tone. It's really cool. Um,
Mhm. One of my good friends, I heard him talk about this yet just a couple days ago when we were recording some video, and it really impacted me. He said, back, depending on where you grew up, it's different everywhere all over the country, at least in the States. But like he said, I grew up with chain link fences in between my house and my neighbor's house. We knew what was in their backyard. We knew when they were working on their car. We knew when they were fighting. We knew who our neighbors were.
yeah.
And now we have 8-foot sump block walls in between us, and we don't know our neighbors anymore.
Hmm.
And I think that's a huge issue
Yeah.
because we stopped caring about who's next door.
Yeah.
We stopped seeing them every day. We stopped knowing who they were. We stopped knowing what's happening in their world. And we all just go in our houses and have our life behind our sump block walls.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
really hurt humanity, I think.
Yeah. We grew up. I mean, I grew up, my wife grew up in Las Vegas, and it's very similar. It's very close knit, dense urban, spaces with 8-foot walls. And we moved to Colorado, and where I currently live, none of us have fences. There's like maybe a small fenced area for your dog so that they don't get away. But even then, most people have electric fences, or,
Mhm.
they don't care if your dog comes in. Everybody's just, and when we moved here, Carrie and I both were like, it's kind of like nobody has walls. Like,
Right?
I
Yeah.
don't want them knowing what's in my backyard. I don't want them
Yeah.
knowing when we fight. And now it's like, man, I don't want to buy a house that has a fence, or, if it is, I want it to be low, and I want to know the people that are in my circle. I want to know and
Mhm.
be able to love on them and care for them. And it's definitely been a shift for us in that respect. And it's helped me get to the place where I really think proximity and understanding is super important. Um, and rather than just like forgetting or canceling or walking away from, lately, probably the last 2 years, when I've heard that there's an issue, or I feel like I've got an issue with something or someone or an organization, I'll do the opposite. I'll actually like go volunteer or go get close and like meet the people. And it doesn't mean that what they're doing is perfect, or it doesn't mean that there aren't any issues. But 9 times out of 10, you find out that people are ultimately doing the best they can, and they're trying to figure it out. Even if, very rarely does someone say, yeah, we made this decision and we know it's totally illegal and wrong. but that's what we felt we should do. Like, it's usually like, oh crap, we got sidetracked. This happened. This happened. It was a, and they're trying to course correct. And
Yeah.
I feel like if more people would recognize, which kind of circles back to the humility piece, right? Like, if they would recognize that, then we'd be less likely to, cancel everything that's coming along
Yeah.
for all sorts of reasons.
I had a pretty powerful experience in the last few months. I've gotten on TikTok, and I'm on TikTok a lot now, and I've got a lot of followers, and so I'm on there a lot. And as a member of the LGBTQI plus, what we call now the alphabet mafia, um,
Nice. Okay, good. Because I
I
keep forgetting what the letters are, so that helps.
there's too many. Just call it the alphabet mafia. We all know what you mean.
Fantastic. I love it.
So, but the T in that is the transgender, and that was something that I've never understood. I have never known transgender people. I've clearly, based on my upbringing, had some judgments about transgender people,
Sure.
and yet they're a part of my community that I was put into. And so on TikTok, one thing I do love about TikTok algorithm is it starts to just group you in with people that might be of like mind with you. And I've started hearing stories from transgender people and hearing them talk about their lives and starting to see the humanity in them. And
That's
like it profoundly moved me one night where I had to go on and say I made a video of like, hey, my transgender people, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I judged you. I'm sorry that I was uncomfortable around you. I'm sorry that I didn't know you, because now what I know is you're my brother and sister just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And it takes that. We have to be willing to get to know the people that make us uncomfortable before
Yeah.
we can judge them.
I think there's like three things in that drive the point home for me. One is you got to be able to admit you don't know what you don't know. Like, I just don't know.
Yeah.
And two, the fact that you were able to be vulnerable enough to apologize to a bunch of people you don't really know and say, man, I didn't know what I didn't know. And this kind of goes back to Maya Angelou, right? Like, if you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
And it really is the truth. When we get to a place where we learn more, which requires that humility, we can say, oh shit, I didn't mean anything by. I got in a lot of trouble with a friend of mine because I said that I thought most racism was not hate but ignorance. And him being a person of color, I don't know if he took offense to it. We didn't really get to finish the conversation, but my point was that most people, most discrimination, regardless of the thing that you're attacking or that you're shunning away, whether it's sexual orientation or ethnicity or skin color, 9 times out of 10, that's not coming from an actual hate. I
Mhm.
don't think. I think it's coming from just ignorance.
Yeah.
It's just coming from somebody told you something, you believed it to be true, but if you actually got close, and there's been studies done that show, there was this really great show about pranks, like they did like pranks and human experiences and things like that, and I can't remember the name of it, but they took a guy and they put him into like a Mexican motorcycle gang kind of a situation.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
had to, and it got to the point, and this was a very racist person who didn't want to do it and was really upset. And by the end of this experiment, he was ready to take a bullet for this guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not, has nothing, it was only him being educated that it's humanity, which is that third piece to what you said. It's the human experience. And we're all afraid of other people. We're all afraid of different things. But if we're willing to get close, I was afraid of essential oils. I thought they were crap. Now, like, I can't get away from
Yeah.
them. And it's, you start to learn, and you have these small wins or these things that start to open your mind, unless you really subscribe to like cognitive dissonance, right? Like, there are some people that just doesn't matter how much information you put in front of them or how close they get to a situation, they just have a willingness to refuse to see what's really happening, you know and that to me is like just a thing that at that point I just pray for you. I'm just gonna love you, but I'm gonna set some boundaries because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
might you might have a mental disorder. Like, I can't help you if you're not willing to be intellectually honest, right? Like really starts to tear it apart. Um, yeah, such a great conversation around that. And there's so much that we could do.
There's so much healing that could happen in the world if we just stopped and got to know another person.
Yeah.
Like, that's the answer. It really, really is. It's the answer to war, it's the answer to famine, it's the answer to everything. Just put yourself in their shoes and get to know who they are as a human being, and you might see things are very different.
Yeah.
And it's so simple, but yet it's so difficult in this world we live in. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's funny. It's actually not, it's not hard. It's actually it's pretty simple. I think it is hard, but it's pretty simple. It's not a complex problem, right? And yet we are so afraid of rejection.
Mhm.
I had someone tell me the other day that cancel culture, in their opinion, was the result of the universal consciousness having radical insecurity. Like we are so insecure
Mm.
and so afraid to say, "Hey, I love Dr. Seuss," or "Hey, I love whatever, um, the royal family." I don't know, whatever the new controversy is this week. That we just jump on the bandwagon and we just say, "Yeah, that's wrong. This is wrong," or we're unable to offer grace and go, "Hey, you know what? Yeah, Dr. Seuss wrote some stuff that was probably not appropriate." And if you look at the whole body of work, there's an evolution where he did some, you know, there are things in there that were inappropriate.
But here's something that about that, since you brought it up, that really goes to this point is what I learned when I researched that. When I took a minute to research beyond the meme, I
Yeah,
discovered that there are several those books were books that he wasn't even comfortable with.
right.
As he evolved, he was like, "Wow, what did I write back then?"
Yeah,
And he wasn't even, so his estate knew that, and it wasn't about what
right.
we're seeing in the memes. And so it's like, just take a minute and learn something.
That's just it, right? Like, and that's the whole thing is it, for me is, and I did a lot of the same research, I think, because what I concluded was like he said things in the 20s and 30s, or when he first started doing cartoons that were inappropriate. It was also contextually appropriate for the time, and it was informed by his poor education. And by the 50s and 60s, he was evolved enough to go back and say, "Man, I look at myself and I'm like, I'm 46 years old. 30-year-old me would not be my friend
Dude, I
because
marched against gay marriage.
yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like,
We
so
evolve.
so at what point does, because I've had someone to tell me like, no, your character is your character, it doesn't change. And I'm like,
Mm.
well, so people aren't able to evolve, and if we do, then they're looked at like as hypocrites, right? Like, Joe Biden's getting blasted for, when he was on the campaign trail about his crime bill and saying it was bad, it was wrong, and people called him a hypocrite. And I was like, well, that was like 1995, 96. It's 25 years later. People evolve, and I'm not to justify or take any
Yeah.
political side because that's not what we're here for. But it's like, are we able to have the conversations of like civil discourse and go, hey, what Dr. Seuss did was this, that, or the other, and when the estate decides we're going to make some modifications, or maybe this shouldn't be, and maybe they'll swing the pendulum and say, you know what, you can still buy the books, but only under like an educational purpose to say this was wrong or this was whatever, because it is historical.
Yeah.
Um, but so many people just read the headline, right? Like I love that. I've not heard that quote beyond the meme. I love it because it's exactly what we need to do. And I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago about something, and she said something to me, and I said, "Well, yeah, but that's not really what's happening." And she said, "Well, I don't really know. I just read the headline." And I was like, "Well, then what the hell? Why are you even speaking? Like,
That's
not
the
to,
problem.
like you. Most of the headlines are to get your eyes on it,
Mhm.
and then you didn't even read it. And it's like, well, no, lavender doesn't cause men to grow breasts, but you just read the headline, right? Or whatever the case may be. And it's it's just crazy. I get so worked up about it sometimes because it's like I'm privileged in the sense that I work from home. I have enormous amounts of free time. I
Mhm.
get to I get to do this, right? And we're gonna, we've been talking for over an hour, and I don't have to worry at all about what's happening or what's going on. I don't have to worry about getting to work. So I have the privilege of being able to do that, and so many people don't.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's so much noise out there that they get completely manipulated into different mindsets without even realizing it.
It's 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 crazy right now. It really is. There's so much information coming from all different sides that you have to just stop and learn. You have
Yeah.
to stop and dig in. And you're one of the people that taught me that. You have to stop and look beyond what you see to know what's really there, especially in today's world. Depending on
It,
what your news source is, you can have the same story told four different ways, and they're all drastically different, and they're the same story.
Yeah, and they're all partially right. There's
Yeah,
there's a nugget of something in there almost every time that you're like, okay, well that's factual, and then the other 4,800 words are
yeah.
It's funny. I don't get wrapped up in the mainstream media stuff a whole lot, because I don't watch any of it. Like I'm a streamer. I've been
Mhm.
streaming things for years now, but there is a lot of truth in what we see and what we perceive drive sort of our beliefs or our emotions. And I have this great example of, you talked about early on when like lockdowns were happening and people were reacting in fear, and a lot of us didn't know what was happening, right? And even some of us who were really sort of anti-establishment were very compliant because we were like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Let me play nice. But I remember going to the store right as it was shifting from like, oh, maybe it's nothing to, hey, I think we're going to start shutting down communities. And I walked in, and some people were in masks, some people weren't, that we didn't have a mandate here yet. And I went to the store and I did my grocery shopping, and everything was fine. And I got all the stuff I needed. And when I left the store, they had arranged the excess shopping carts in a way to create a very separated entry and exit to create queue lines. And I was putting the groceries in my car, and I looked back at the store and I got anxiety for like, and I'm not an anxious person. I got anxiety for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what's happening? Like what? And it's like kind of like in the movies when you start seeing like the tanks show up and they start putting out the razor wire. And I recognized that like what I was seeing wasn't I wasn't any less safe in that moment than I was 5 minutes ago. But I felt
Yeah.
very much different. And I had to do some real work to like calm myself down. And I don't think many people, if I hadn't, I don't know whether it was divine or whatever, but if I hadn't had that ping that said, hey, this is nothing, relax, I could have very easily gone home and started hoarding and gone back in the store and grabbed 10 more rolls of toilet paper,
Yeah.
whatever it was. But it's really fascinating to me that little nuance of the change in environment. It didn't change the air quality. It didn't change because at that point, if I was getting it from being in the grocery store, I'd already gotten it. I was already there for an hour.
Mhm.
Like how just that little bit of manipulation completely changed my physical state for a moment.
Yeah.
And that actually scared me more than what was happening. That like, oh, I'm so what's the word? I'm so malleable to the outside environment, right? Instead of like, where do I believe? Where am I at? I know I'm safe.
Yeah.
It's so for me, I just think we have to like surround ourselves with people that we trust. Definitely people with opposing views. You and I don't agree on everything. We have things that,
Mhm.
we don't vote the same way. We don't eat the same way. We don't. And I love that we can kind of challenge one another on that. And I think it's important because I don't want to live in an echo chamber. I don't want everybody around me to be like, "Yes, you're perfect. You're amazing. Go get them."
Yeah.
And your guy's the best. And yes, you're right about that. And like, I want people to challenge so that we can learn and grow.
Yeah. One of the greatest experiences that I had during the last election cycle, and we all know how horrific that was.
Oh, it was a good time.
was a friend of mine who is completely on the other. I couldn't have been further opposite on the fence from me. She called me up and said, "Can we have lunch? I want to talk politics."
Wow.
And we had lunch, and she told her views, and I told my views, and why we believed what we did, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was so good. And I helped her see a few things differently. She helped me see a few things differently, and we had a great time. And there was no fighting on Facebook, and there was no calling each other names. And
Yeah.
we're human beings sitting down with each other, having lunch,
Yeah.
talking about our differences. It was
Yeah.
great.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
Even I have found that for me, the people who have the strongest opposing view, those are the ones I want to get on the phone with.
Hmm.
Those are the ones I want to talk to.
Yeah.
And it really is just help me understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I'm
But
not
both
trying to
people
change
have
your
to be
mind.
willing. That's the thing, though, is both people have to be willing to have an
Yeah.
open conversation. And that's hard to find today, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't want to know. I don't want to try to make you feel bad. I don't want to make you come to my side, or I don't want you to try. I just want help me understand where you're coming from, why you think that. And what I found, and this kind of circles way back, most people don't know.
Hmm.
They've
100%.
just been told. Well,
Yeah.
my dad said, or Rush Limbaugh said, or Megan Kelly said, or Rachel Maddow said, or and
Yeah.
it's like, well, did you read beyond the headline, or did you go beyond the meme? Did you look into it at all? And most of the time, they're like, well, no. And so I just kind of leave it at that. Like, well, okay, cool. Go do more. Maybe you'll even fall more in love with whatever it is that you think you feel, right? And I don't think because man, I want opposing views. I want six parties. I want
Yeah.
15 religions. I want like everyone to be able to explore that for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so good. What tell me about I want to shift a little bit. Tell me what you're doing with your nonprofit. Tell me about that because I love this story. I think people need to hear it, and I'm so excited for when you launch it. And I don't know if anyone has said this to you yet, so I'm going to say it out loud. And if I'm too late, that's okay. But I want to be the first person to do their actual thing when you're ready.
Okay. You got it. I will make sure that happens. Awesome.
Okay.
So I am so excited about this. So a couple years ago at Christmas, I was running through Facebook, and one of my friends posted the story that her and a bunch of friends got together and went to a restaurant, and they each brought an extra $100 bill with them, and they left all of that as the tip for their server. And I'm like, what an amazing thing to be able to do. So literally, like that day, I put a dinner party together at a local restaurant, but I didn't want it just to go to anybody. I didn't want just like some college student who's hanging out. And I wanted it to make sure. I want to make sure we impacted somebody who really needed it. Not to say college students don't, but
Yeah, they're more likely to throw a cake party though than
yeah. So I found somebody who owned a restaurant and talked to her and said, "Hey, do you have any servers who are really in need right now?" And she said, "Absolutely." So we about 15 of my friends showed up, and we actually had two servers because it was such a big party, but they were both people they knew and needed, and we targeted them, and we were able to give them like a $1,500 tip that they split, which is a decent tip, and they were happy.
Oh, for
So
sure.
this year I did it again. I planned on making it an annual thing. Well, this year because of COVID, I couldn't say, "Okay, 20 of my friends, let's go to a restaurant." And I had the idea because I had seen some other things on TikTok. And so I put out a message on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and said, "Hey guys, here's what I'm doing. On this day, we're going to dinner. If you want to contribute to the tip, here's my Venmo, here's my Cash App, here's my PayPal. Send a buck. Send whatever you got." And we were able to find a server who was in some pretty serious need, who had had a pretty shitty couple years. And we were able to give her a $2,000 tip, and that $2,000 represented about 500 or 600 people who pitched in. And I've always had a dream to be able to go really help people in a big way. And I always had this belief that I couldn't do that until I was rich, until I was a millionaire myself. And this event helped me see that everyone has the like when a whole bunch of people give a little, we can do amazing things. And so I created this nonprofit. We're just about to launch. I'm filling out, I'm spending the next 2 days filling out my 501c3 application. Um, and the idea is it's called For Humanity with the number four. And the website's going to be imforhumanity.com with the number four. And it's about give a buck. If and so what I'm asking is I'm asking everybody to donate a minimum of $1 a week, $4 a month. Most people won't even miss that. It's less than a cup of coffee. But what happens when I get 5 million people to do that is that I have $260 million a year that I can go do really amazing good with.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a no-brainer. Like, set yourself up with an auto donation, $4 a month. You're not going to miss it. And when millions of people do that, look what we can do. So we're looking at doing programs where you can nominate, if you have a neighbor who you know is really struggling, you can nominate them for a gift and we will show up and pay their rent or buy their groceries or do something to help them. We're also working at programs where we're going to do micro lending programs to help people start their own businesses. We're going to start a scholarship program for people who want to further their education and go get like trade certifications or something to put themselves in a better place in their life. You
Yeah.
know, there's millions of people in the world who are stuck in a really bad, let's say, a domestic abuse situation where they don't have the money to leave and they're fearing for their life every day. What if we show up and say, hey, here's your deposit for your new house and your first 3 months rent are paid, and we're going to help you go get some education.
Yeah.
Like, that blows my mind to be able to do that for somebody. Like, I would love to be able to say, yeah, I give money away for a living. Like,
Yeah. It's
and when I realized, and one of the messages we have is you have the ability to give a $10,000 check to somebody when you become a part of this movement
yeah.
with your $1. And to be able to really truly find people who, and clearly we can't help everyone, but I mean, we've got ideas down the road to buy shopping malls and turn them into homeless rehabilitation centers. And like, we've got big
Yeah.
stuff we're working on. But
I'll tell you what, I would look at multi-tenant office buildings because
yeah,
now that everybody knows how they can work from home, the real estate market is going to have a lot of vacancies, and you
absolutely.
could probably get a deal. And
Absolutely.
what an awesome way to turn this pandemic into a blessing for people, right?
Yeah.
Like taking taking advantage of that for good. I When you told me about this, I had chills, and I think it's such an amazing project. And one of the really cool things about it, I mean, and I'm preaching to the choir because you guys have unpacked this in so many different ways, is that idea that like I spend $20 a week on coffees,
Mhm.
and I would not miss in a heartbeat a coffee or $1 a week. Like, it's insane. Most people, if they went through their couch cushions right now, could find
Yeah.
$1, $4, and they can go through their car seats the next week if they really needed to. It's so easy to help people that way.
One of
So
the really important things that we're kind of setting as a precedent, though, is that I don't want government grants. I don't want corporate donations. This is about people helping people. This isn't about me going and getting $25,000 from the government and helping. I want this to be about people helping people, because that's when magic happens.
yeah,
Because when I handed that woman that $2,000 at Christmas, it changed who I am.
yeah,
I left that restaurant a different person. And I
yeah,
want everyone to experience that. And so the idea is, if you're one of my donors, then you know what? You're going to get a text message and says, hey, here's a video of the person that we just gave $1,000 to. Thank you for making that possible.
yeah,
So that you can experience that your dollar changed someone's life.
yeah. It's so good. I'm so excited for you, and I can't wait to see where that comes out. So there are 10 people in my house. We have myself, my wife, and my 8 children. And so when you launch, everyone that lives in this household will donate $4 a week.
Yes, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Right
I
on.
actually have my 11-year-old who I shared this with is like, let me know when it happens, because they all get allowance. They know.
That's
So we absolutely want to be a part of that, and I can't wait. And right now, you and I are probably the only two people listening to this. but I know it will grow, and we
Yeah,
will continue to push it. And when you're
absolutely.
launched, we will have you sponsor the podcast in name only, because we'll share it and we'll let people
Definitely.
know how to get in touch and what to do. And for me, I think it's a really great place to kind of wrap it up and just this is what radical accountability looks like, right? Like you have an opportunity to change somebody's life. You did so. And instead of saying, okay, this is the one time, one thing deal, you sat with it, you felt it, you took it and said, okay, what can I do with this? And how do I make this not just about me and feeling good? Because I know, I mean, you and I talked after you did it, and like I know that changed you, and we know it changed her life too. But to take that, not many people would take that experience and just share it on Instagram or TikTok or whatever and then walk away and not do it, let it be. But to take it into what you want to turn into like a global movement. And, a couple years ago when we talked, your purpose was shifting humanity, and there were that was going to manifest in a different way,
Yeah.
right? And now there's this other thing that has come up for you. And I'll be honest with you, the first project you shared with me, there was some passion behind it, but your felt passion for this
It keeps me
is
up at night.
days beyond what how you showed up when you told me about your other projects, you
Yeah.
know? So I love it, man. Do you have anything else you want to share? You got anything?
No, just if you're listening to this, go find someone and learn something about them. Like that's the magic. It's really what it is.
I dig it. We're gonna put all of Roger's socials, his TikTok, his Insta, his whatever you want to share, your website. I know you've got coaching programs, you got things on there. We'll share all that in the show notes. We'll tag you in all that stuff. And that's it, friends. This is what shifting people towards purpose is all about. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.